Welcome to the hatchery. The eggs are collected and washed and stored overnight over at the breeder farm. The wash building was built a few years ago at my request. We used to wash eggs here, which makes no sense, collecting dirty eggs, bringing them to the hatchery, and then washing them. We got away from that, and I think it's been a big improvement in our biosecurity and the health of our birds. The room we're in here right now is just a work room where we're going to be traying eggs. We call out anything that's small or cracked, anything that's odd shaped, maybe flat-sided. So that's basically what we do here. And all we're doing is once they wash them, they put them into these stacking flats, and they're put into crates. Crates are labeled what type of bird it is. They're labeled what date they come from. We bring them here. We tray them by using one of these lifts, and I'll just show you real quick. Instead of doing one egg at a time by hand as we used to, we're able to actually pick up 46 at a time, look at the bottoms, make sure everything is not cracked or is in good condition, and then they go into the incubator tray. So it saves us a lot of time. We have 3 of these lifts. As opposed to doing 18,000, 19,000 eggs in one day by hand, it goes a lot faster. So it's definitely been a big time saver. So this room is just for working, traying the eggs. We try to keep this as clean as possible. You folks are probably the most people that come in through here in a year. So the hatchery is probably the most biosecure part of the farm. We're going to go through just the way we would take the eggs through. We're going to take a path through the cooling room and up into the incubator room and into the hatching room. So this is our cooling room. It's where we store the eggs until they're ready to be set into the incubators. We hold this at 58 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. We try to maintain 75% relative humidity. A lot of poultry places in the chicken business will keep a cooling room a little bit warmer, anywhere from 63 to 65. We prefer keeping it a little bit cooler. Number one, we store eggs a little bit longer than most chicken businesses do, and we feel that the cooler temperature is better for the embryo, and we're able to hold it at a more stable condition until it's ready to go into the incubator. We have 15 different flocks that we have to keep track of and keep them separate. Most of those are ringneck types of birds that we're working with, but we still have to keep all the flocks separate so we can measure their productivity, fertility, and hatchability. Right now, most of these eggs are coming from the 2 breeder barns, number 6 and number 7 at the breeder farm. We have a call for early birds for the farm. We don't have a lot of customers for early birds that the hens or any of the other straight run at this time because it's a little bit early for people to be raising birds. So what happens is we have to start our flocks early, and we get some of our males to the farm early, but then we have to hold off. And what we're doing is we don't have the customers right now for a lot of chicks, and as you can see, we have a lot of eggs. And I actually have eggs here that are from the 13th of February, which is really unusual for us at this time of year to have eggs that are over 3 weeks old. Towards the end of the season, you may have to hold eggs just because egg production is going down. But at this time, we've got plenty of eggs and not the customers. The reason I bring this up is that when you hold eggs anytime longer, 10, 14 days, you start to lose hatchability. And something from 21 days old is going to be a substantial loss in hatchability. What we would hope for with fresh eggs is, of hatch of fertile eggs, which is hatchability, you would want 90+% of those fertile eggs to hatch. With eggs that are 3 weeks old, we'll be hopeful to get 82–83% of the fertile eggs to hatch. You'll have higher early embryonic mortality. You'll have a dragged out hatch. You'll have birds that are just too weak to get out of the shell. Chick quality can also suffer. So it's something we have to deal with. And the way we deal with it is making sure we set our eggs at the proper time. So we're trying to hatch our eggs on a Monday at 1 o'clock so the birds are all ready to come off. It's real important to have a real condensed hatch window, that is from the first chick to the last chick. It's real important to not only to chick quality, but the way you get birds off. You don't want birds, you'd be taking some birds off that are ready and having birds that are still hatching, because what you do then is you cool down the hatch, or it slows down the hatch for those birds even more. So it's all kind of tied together. Now with old eggs, what we'll have to do is we'll have to pull those eggs not only a lot earlier to set early, but we have to actually give them more time to sit out and temper. It's always a good practice to bring your eggs out of the cooler and let them slowly warm up to a room temperature, or a temperature closer to the incubator before you put them in. When you don't do that and you put eggs right into a hot incubator, eggs will sweat. It's a stress on the embryo. You get condensation on the eggs. Good way for bacteria to move across the eggshell. So you want to avoid that. So with these old eggs, I'll have to pull them out 24 hours ahead of time before I want to set them into the incubator. And in addition to that, I want to set them even earlier than I normally would set fresh eggs. Our ringneck birds, our eggs would be set at maybe 7 a.m. on a Friday morning to hatch on a Monday afternoon, 24 and a half days out. So at 7 a.m. the fresh eggs would go in. Unfortunately, eggs that have been stored for 14 days or 21 days have to go in early. So anything from 14 to 21 days, I'm probably going to set maybe 3 in the morning. Anything even older than that, I probably set at midnight the night before. And those old eggs, like I was saying, need even longer to warm up. So I'll be pulling those real old eggs, letting them out in a room that's about 75 degrees for about 12 hours. Then for another 12 hours, I'll bring them up into the incubator room where it's 83 degrees. And that's all prior to loading them at midnight on Thursday. The other eggs, which are fresher, I don't have to let them warm up as long. So they're going to be pulled out 6 to 8 hours before I set them. And if they're fresh eggs, I wouldn't have to load them till 7 a.m. on Friday morning. So all these factors have to be taken account of, and you have to judge which eggs need to be pulled when, what breed has to go in at what time. For instance, our white birds take a lot longer. Instead of setting on Friday morning, we have to actually set them on Thursday afternoon to have them hatch at the same time the ringnecks do. Melanistic mutants, have to set those at midnight, 10 o'clock to midnight on Thursday for them to hatch at the same time the ringnecks. So these are all things that we have to consider when the office calls and tells me, well, we need this many trays of ringnecks, we need this many trays of mutants, and this many trays of whites. And so when we're told we need this, then we have to go in here, figure out when these have to be pulled out, when they have to be set, and that's how all that goes into trying to get the birds to hatch at the correct time. These are our incubators. These are Nature Form I-14s. Each one holds 21,528 eggs. They're a multi-stage machine, which means that we put different ages of eggs in at different times. Ideally, you'll load 26 trays of eggs, which is 7,176, and then a week later you'll do another 7,176, and then another week later another 7,176. And when you get to that third week, the first one is 21 days old. Those are the ones that get transferred out into the hatching room, into the hatchers, and then a new set goes in. So that's how a multi-stage works. The idea of the multi-stage was that multi-stage machines don't use quite as much energy because the developing embryos are producing heat, and so you don't have the electricity used to heat up the machine itself. Another good thing about multi-stage is that the fresh eggs get a really quick start. It only takes about an hour for this machine to warm up to temperature. And you can see we're running these at 99 degrees, 51% relative humidity. And that's exactly what they'll run at for the rest of the year. We don't do any adjusting. The multi-stage has another so-called advantage in that since the old eggs are producing heat and it's not working as hard, you save energy, but you also have a CO2 being produced by the older eggs. And this is conducive to the younger eggs getting a good start. CO2 apparently has some effect either on pH or the chemical composition of the young egg, and the metabolism is stimulated and the birds get a better start. With a single stage, which is an all-in, all-out machine, they can do the same thing just by closing up the ventilation. And so multi-stage tries to do it through the older embryos producing the CO2, while single-stage machines, they close the ventilation up to achieve the same thing. The one thing about multi-stage is that I said is that you can't really change the temperature and humidity. You have to run it all the same. A lot of people are going back to a single stage, all in, all out now because they can do more with the incubation profile. That is that they can experiment with different profiles for different breeds, different flocks. For instance, I bet we could probably improve our hatch of fertile for our white birds if we had single stage machines and studied how to better incubate the white eggs. Or a bigger egg, they take longer. Do they need more heat? Do they need less heat? And so you can actually do more things with a single stage machine. Unfortunately, that we don't have the capability to do with multi-stage. So what we've done is we've just over the years, through breakouts and measuring hatchability of different breeds, we've arrived at that 99 degrees Fahrenheit and 51% relative humidity is the best profile for our multi-stage and for our birds. That may differ for other people, and especially for if people have different size birds and different breeds of birds. So, but this is what works for us. These machines have intakes for fresh air on the back. The fan forces it forward. The exhaust outlet is on the top. We try to vent as much of the exhausted air out of the machine, out of the building. That's what the pipes above the exhaust vents are. We also have fresh air coming in here at all time. They go through an air exchange system, which is a system where when it's winter, we're pumping hot air out and bringing cold air in. They run through baffles, and we actually warm the cool air. And what that does is saves us money and energy-wise, and we're still able to bring in a lot of fresh air during the winter. And the same thing happens with summer when it's really hot. We're having to air condition here and bringing in air that's much warmer. We're able to save money by cooling that hot air before it comes into the system. We have an alarm system that will tell us if the compartments overheat, if a motor goes out, or if we have a power outage. The alarm system will call me, and if it doesn't get me, it goes right down a list until it gets somebody that will show up for the alarm. We do have an automatic generator that you came in by on the front door. That will call, if we have any sort of power outage, that comes on automatically, almost so fast that sometimes not all the alarms go off. And so whenever there's a power outage, we're really in a good position. We used to have to actually bring a tractor and a PTO-driven generator up here. There's nothing worth it trying to run a PTO thing in a storm. So we're in a much better situation. So like I said, they're in here for 21 days, and that's when we transfer. What's interesting about our system is we have more incubator space than we have hatcher space. What that means is I don't have enough room for all the eggs that are in here in the hatchers. And the way we deal with that is we actually candle all the eggs. And that's just holding or taking a handheld light to every one of these eggs and determining whether they're fertile. We start at 10 days of incubation. We pull trays out onto a cart, go through them. It takes about, depending on the fertility, anywhere from 4 to 5 minutes to do a tray. So the trays might be out anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. And then they go right back in. Doesn't hurt them at all. They don't cool down to any degree. But what we do is we go through, candle with the light, remove any infertiles, any early deads, and then move all the eggs back together into the center of the tray, so there's no cool spots. Put them back in there. And what this does is not only does it give us room in the hatcher, it tells us exactly how many viable fertile embryos we've got. And that's what's going to be transferred into our machine. And when we're doing that, you know, a week ahead of our hatches, that means that we can tell if we're going to have extra chicks or we're going to be short of chicks. And so if we have extra chicks, we have really good fertility, we can sell more chicks. If we know we're going to have a poor fertility, poor hatch, we can adjust and maybe take fewer to the farm or ask a customer to move back a week or whatever. So it's really good for our sales department to know the fertility. Hatchability is usually a much more constant variable. In the beginning of the year, if you're not holding eggs like we are, you usually have with ringnecks around a 90% hatch fertile. And so you can pretty much gauge, if you know the fertility, you can pretty much predict what your overall hatches can be. And we're talking about, you know, we're hatching 50,000. I know that doesn't sound like much when Oliver's doing 350,000 in a week, but when we do 50,000 in a day, and are able to predict, you know, within a couple hundred birds what we've got available ahead of time, it's a pretty good deal. The other thing that we find out is that when we have nothing but fertile eggs being transferred into the hatchers, our hatch window is much narrow, and that's the time from the first to the last chick. And what's special about if you have all fertile eggs in it, they're all developing at the same rate. They all start to hatch, and it's actually a stimulus for the chicks when they feel one that is starting to hatch and move around. It's called clicking, and what they do is they actually are stimulated by the ones next to them that are starting to hatch. And so what that does, it's a stimulus for all of them to hatch at once. And so when you have all fertile eggs in contact with each other, you have a much more uniform hatch, much smaller hatch window. It works really good for us, and so there's an advantage to that. Also, we find that when we start to get into the season where we have poorer fertility, if you had all those infertile eggs in there, you would have cool spots within the tray, okay? And what that means is it's not a uniform temperature like it is when you have all completely fertile eggs. And so there'd be cool spots in certain birds that are not in contact, and then they're going to develop and hatch at different times. And so that in itself, you know, helps us with a hatch window by not having all those infertile eggs in there at the end of the season when fertility goes down. We also find that if we have you know, all fertile eggs, we get about a 1 to 2% better hatch than when we put all the infertiles in with the fertiles. So we're actually getting a bump up in the hatch. So, and that's more of a deal when it's towards the end of the season when you have poorer fertility. Right now when fertility is really good, it's not as big of an issue. On 21st day, we transfer the eggs out of the incubators. We just use this simple contraption for doing it. The 26 trays are taken out, put on a dolly, they're brought in here. The tray with the eggs are put on this platform. The basket goes over it, and they're able to just transfer the whole tray of eggs at one shot. Like that, only it's a lot smoother with two people doing it. And so then you have the eggs in there, you remove the tray, and then, because we've removed eggs that are infertile and early dead, we add more eggs. And so what we actually do is we fill this up, and there'll actually be about 320 eggs in each one of these baskets. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's good to have full trays, because when chicks hatch, they really need to have good footing. Now this paper is real good, but if you don't have the shells and debris and stuff for them to really push against, a lot of times you'll get spraddle legs chicks, and that's when their legs go out to the side. Also, just because you have a full tray, everything is in contact, and there you have that clicking stimulus factor going on again. So we fill up the trays, and we get much better and much more uniform hatch. The machines themselves are just like the incubator. We run them a little different. After 21 days, you don't really want to turn pheasant eggs. You can do some damage to where their navels are healing. They still will hatch if you did turn them, but it's best to put them into baskets like this so they can't get out and run around and things like that. So this machine, what they'll do is it will run it at 97.8 degrees, which is over a degree and 2/10 lower than what we run the incubators. The birds don't need as much heat. They're producing their own heat. If you kept running them at a high temperature, you'd have a lot of overheating in the last few days of the hatching process. So they're in here for 4 days. So 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit. We run the humidity on a wet bulb, and it's about the same as it is there. It's an 83-degree wet bulb, which is right around 51% relative humidity. When birds start to hatch, they're going to raise the humidity themselves. It used to be common practice, both in our business and in chickens, to raise the humidity when birds were ready to start hatching, when they started pipping, believing that that would help them keep moist and they would come off. Yeah, exactly. What happens in these machines is the birds actually do it themselves, because when they start to hatch, they give off all the moisture when they're breathing. They raise the humidity in themselves, and they time it perfectly. It doesn't call, if you add humidity, what happens then is your heaters have to be on all the time. Okay, and so then you got them fighting each other, and you tend to get overheating in some of the baskets that are located near the heating. So what we found is that we didn't gain anything by raising the humidity and artificially, and we actually were losing some hatchability to birds that were close to the heater bars. And so we don't do that anymore. Some people still do, but we've gotten away from it, and a lot of the chicken industry has too. So they're in here for 4 days. Up here with these tables and stuff, we just do straight run. That is, they're counting them into boxes like this. These are boxes that are going to Canada on a delivery, and we have some over here that are going to Minneapolis post office. That'll be shipped. They'll be shipped out on airplanes. Some are going to Washington State. Some are going to Florida, and they'll get there probably early Wednesday morning to most of their destinations. We do use a hydrating gel called Enman that we mix up and put in. Gives them some moisture and some nutrients during their trip. And so they arrive there in pretty good shape if everything goes right. Usually the biggest problem is at the other end where somebody doesn't do the right thing and they put them out in the cold runway or some silly thing like that. But Minneapolis post office does a really good job of shipping chicks from their point of origin. So if you guys are ready, we're going to go down to the shipping room. What they're doing here is they're determining the sex of the day-old chicks by looking at the facial markings. The males will have flaps of skin that actually show what the wattle will be when they grow up. When they're mature, they have the real dark red wattle. The females are lacking in that characteristic, and so they're separating the males and females into different boxes. Nick over here is counting them into orders, and then plastic boxes here are the males, and they're all going to the farm. Everything else is getting shipped.